I call the Honourable Member Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker.
Kia ora.
Ngā nui kia koutou. I rise to oppose this bill, the Building Amendment Bill number 4, on behalf of our housing spokesperson, UMP Holly Walker. You're right, Maggie Barry, it is the Building Amendment Bill number 3, got to get it right. And this is the problem. This is one of the reasons why the Greens, along with Labour, are opposing it, because we've got a proliferation of bills. We've got number 3, we've got number 4. My question to the Minister is, what's the rush? Why don't we focus on digging good foundations, getting those foundations ready, getting the package all together, making sure it was weather-tight before we went down this path of passing two separate bills? The Minister himself acknowledged we're seeing a piecemeal approach in the drafting of legislation, and this isn't what the sector needs. It isn't what the sector wants. After hours of debate in this House, where we've seen toing and throwing between the red side and the blue side, saying who is responsible for the leaking buildings crisis, who is responsible for cutting all that red tape that led to all those problems. And after hours and hours of debate, all we found out was that they were both responsible. The ideologies that captured both parties at that time were responsible for the housing crisis, were responsible for the leaking buildings, the billions of dollars of bills facing our councils, our households, the government. They were both responsible. So I'd like to acknowledge the changes we saw in 2004 when the Honourable Shane Jones amended the Building Act. What we needed to find was a balanced approach, a solid approach. And this isn't what we have with this bill. It's a piecemeal approach. And that's what the Minister and Nikki Wagner said. So the key change we're seeing under the Building Amendment Bill number 3 is the shift in responsibility from councils, the consenting authorities, towards responsibility going towards builders and consumers. The focus is on accountability, but the questions arise around liability, around responsibility. Because when you have a $100 fly-by-night building company who's responsible, doesn't really mean anything to the householder facing the bill. What I think people want was a balanced approach where they knew they were going to be covered. If we were going to see problems in the future, there was a long-term body, like a consenting authority, like a council, who would be there to support them. We saw in the Select Committee that the government refused to have the genuine debate around proportionate liability or the mandatory warranties. Now, Mr Speaker, a key part of this bill, Section 90D, which is the owner-builder exemption. Green Party supports this in particular. We like the tradition of the DIY tradition of Kiwis being able to build their own house. But a note of caution, because in the Building Amendment Bill number 4, what we see is that original owner-builder responsible, maybe 6 or more houses being sold down the line for the original house they built. Now, I don't think we're going to see that many owner-builders building their own homes when they know 6 times down the house has been sold, they're still liable for what's happened to that house. So we support accountability, got some big questions around the owner-building clause in number 4. Ultimately, though, what we see, and I think Nikki Wagner put the hammer on the nail, the bill is all about cutting red tape, all about cutting bureaucracy. It's those slogans we love to hear from this side of the House. And I guess the analogy about building is when you do all those things, it's like building a house out of straw. Now, I've got a 4-year-old, so I'm used to reading about the 3 little pigs, and I know what happens when you build that house out of straw, when you don't have those solid foundations of a holistic, a solid bill. What you get is your house being blown over. So I'd like to thank all the officials that worked on the bill. I'd like to thank all the submitters. It's a real pity we can't get consensus in the House. I have to update the story, Honourable Williamson, for the New Zealand context. I think just on the final note, it's a pity we couldn't get consensus. I'm sure the Minister would have liked to have seen the whole House pass this bill with all party support. It's disappointing we couldn't get there, but in the future I think what we'll need is a solid approach to building. We'll be opposing this bill. Kia ora.
I call the Honourable Member Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.